Culture is the sum of our behaviors. It's simply put, it's the sum of our behaviors. It's not the sum of our intentions. It's not the sum of our desires. It's the sum of our behaviors.
Well, hey, welcome to the Culture-neer podcast, another episode. I'm your host, Terry Gwaltney, and I'm excited about our guest today, Chris Darley. He's a speaker, coach. He's an owner of a couple of Chick-fil-A restaurants, most notably probably the one in the Mercedes Dome. If you're a Atlanta Falcons fan, go by and see him. Let his staff serve you with their pleasure.
Yes.
I ran across Chris at a fellowship event in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and he come and spoke, and just a couple of the words that he spoke really resonated with what this show is about and what we're about even as an organization. And I was just, man, this guy, we've got to get him on the show. And so I was so gracious when he accepted, our request to spend a little time with us today. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Yeah, really excited. The event that we were at, that Fellowship One event, was one that I was even surprised that it was a lot of Chick-fil-A people, and I was taking notes. So I love it when there's those types of events where we can all grow and learn. So it was great to meet you there, and excited about today.
Yeah. The thing about culture that I like is it really doesn't matter what industry we're in. We're really in the people business, and culture is such a principle that it just applies because you have people, whether it's selling chicken, selling, roofs, or selling whatever the case might be. It doesn't matter. Those principles just apply. And so it's always neat to see how that all comes together. One of the things that stuck out to me is on your LinkedIn profile, it says your daily goal to glorify God and be a faithful steward of what he's entrusted to me. That is so admirable, and I thought so in line with the mission of Truett Cathy and Chick-fil-A. If you read the Purpose Stone, out in front of the the corporate office, and I think it just shows how you're aligned with that vision and your mission in your personal life and your professional. And one of the things we like to talk about a lot, because I think it's the way successful companies manage today, is we have to manage the team that we have from a holistic approach, meaning we just can't take this one compartment of their life, only be concerned about that, only invest in that, and expect to, have the kind of loyalty and engagement and, quite honestly, the responsibility that we really have as leaders to help develop even in the other areas of their life. And I think that so embodies all of that. So anyway, super excited. So why don't we start today by you telling our audience just a little bit about, Chris, your journey to end up in the, Chick-fil-A world and kind of all the interesting things in between, from your spouse, your family, your kids, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of culture, and you can drop some wisdom bombs on us today. How's that sound?
I love it. Well, it's funny when you say Chick-fil-A and what was in between. The only thing in between Chick-fil-A and Chick-fil-A was a couple of summer jobs. And it's really humbling to think about that. This August, I started Chick-fil-A 29 years ago. And so as a first job, two of my great friends said, "Hey, you should get a job at Chick-fil-A." And a year later, I found myself going, "Man, I want to do this. I want to do what my owner-operator, Brad." So a shout out to Brad Williams, still one of the best operators out there. I want to do this idea of ministry and business. I didn't know you could do both. I thought you either had to work at a nonprofit or you had to work at a bank or in a business. And so when I saw the two together, the power of and, I saw it. I didn't just hear about it. I didn't read about it. I watched Brad Williams, who was my operator, and David Daniels, who was my general manager. And now David's an operator, and I'm an operator. And a guy that I trained to bread chicken is now an operator. He's actually a better operator than I am, Chud Shafe. Shout out to him. And it was just really humbling reality of this chicken slinging job turned into an opportunity to live out purpose. So the short version is I went to Clemson with the intention of being an operator. I'm going to go get a degree because I want to be an operator. And changed majors a couple times. In my senior year, one of my best friends, I was sitting there struggling about, do I go to grad school or what do I do? And she said, you know, you want to be an operator. Why are you struggling? It was just a clear moment. I went and downloaded the application, printed it off because that's what you did in 2000, and I filled out the application. And for some reason, Chick-fil-A said yes to a 22-year-old kid to be an owner operator, and very humbled for that opportunity in February of 2001. So
Wow.
February 2001, fast forward, my first restaurant was in Greensboro, North Carolina, July 1st. And it was a 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. No nights, no weekends. My 1994 Honda Accord was my delivery vehicle. I would hustle into hospitals with coolers of chicken sandwiches, building the business, and it was a great opportunity to cut my teeth as a first business opportunity. My wife and I, Martha, we met at Clemson, so she's a good tiger, and we were in Greensboro for 2 years, and then we had the opportunity. Now, let me back up. I didn't define a word for you. There's an F word at Chick-fil-A, right? And that F word is flexible, right? You have to be very careful how you use the word flexible. So I think in my initial interview, I said, hey, I'm flexible. I can go anywhere. Well, that word came up again in 2003 as Dan Cathy stood on stage at our annual seminar and said, hey, we're opening restaurants in California. We're going westward, right? We only had 3 mall restaurants in the whole state, and we're going to open freestanding street restaurants with drive-throughs, dining rooms, so forth and so on. So I was talking to a guy that works at the corporate office about a candidate going to California. And I said, I know Chick-fil-A is always looking for long-term commitments. And, Martha and I like California, but, we understand. He looks at me and goes, well, Chris, we're wanting to be a little flexible on this one. So 2 hours later, I walked in the hotel room and I told Martha, I said, I might have maybe said that we're possibly interested in California. Well, 3 weeks later, we were looking at dirt. 3 months later, we moved to California. And then 3 months after that, we opened up in Corona, California, and March 11th, 2004. So that was 20 years ago. What an incredible journey. People didn't know what Chick-a-Flick, Chick-a-Fill, Chick-fil-A. I actually answered the phone one time and a woman said, is this a girl's clothing store? And I was like, man, who's pranking me? But legitimate, people didn't know what the brand was. They didn't know what Chick-fil-A was. And we had a great time. We loved California. Our boys that are now 18 years old were born there. But life brought us back. We really prayed for wisdom of what do we do in the midst of, do we continue pioneering or do we be near family? Do I express, how do we figure all this out? And the long story short there, as I took an opportunity at the corporate office at Chick-fil-A, which is here in Atlanta, and did that for a couple of years, and through some additional opportunities. What I was doing at the corporate office, I was actually recruiting operators. So I went from being an operator to recruiting operators. And one morning I woke up and I said, what happens if I think I'm actually the best candidate for that location? So how do I throw my own name in the hat back in the ring? And so in 2008, I came to Chick-fil-A Eastlake, which is in Marietta, Georgia. Been here for about 16 years. And I was told by my wife, the moving truck is going to stay for 16 years. We're gonna hang out one spot for a while because we had moved 7 times in 7 years. And then I took over the Chick-fil-A inside of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium August of 2022. So I had that for almost 2 years now. So that's the medium version of the story. Third thing, I have a daughter. She's amazing. She's 16, and when I grow up, I want to be just like her. She is the most determined, driven, spunky little girl. Super proud of her. And my boys actually graduated from high school tonight. And
wow.
So that's my story.
Wow. Busy season in your life still. A lot of transition.
Yeah. A lot.
Wow, that's awesome. I'd like to unpack just a little bit of what you said there. When you first started talking, you were talking about you seen for the first time that you could have business and ministry and not have to choose between the two. I think that's such an incredible revelation, especially at such a young age. Tomorrow, actually, I'm speaking to a group in Louisville, and they wanted me to talk about just kingdom perspective, on business. And as I was kind of preparing my notes, one of the things that I was reminded of is that I think many times for those of us that are believers, um, sometimes there's the tendency to feel almost like a second class Christian because we're not on a staff of a church or a nonprofit. And like what I'm doing maybe is not that significant. Maybe if I really wanted to be in real ministry, I'd leave all this behind and I would go
Mm,
have that title. And it's so far from the truth. And I think more business owners kind of catching the revelation of I need to bloom where I'm planted because most nonprofits can't function without money. Most of them, can benefit, from a for-profit business and what they've learned and those principles being applied. And it really is such a marriage of two strengths. I think there's so
yep.
much that for-profit businesses can learn from nonprofit. I mean, think about if me and you both could run our businesses and all we had to do was furnish donuts and they would all show up and didn't have to be paid, which is how most
Mm,
churches operate the massive amount of their staff, so to speak, as volunteer. They're so in tune with the mission and the vision that,
yep.
give me something to eat when I show up and I'm going to donate my time every week. So there's a lot I think we could
Okay.
learn about casting vision and mission from from a business standpoint. But I also think when it comes to the nonprofit, I think there's things that, they could benefit from by, having to learn how to operate, in excellence and, having a strategic, plan, even for the future. And so when you can
Yes.
marry those two worlds, it makes them both so much stronger. And so I think to come to that conclusion, in your early 20s, man, that set the course, I think, probably for your destiny. That's pretty cool. So you have anything else to kind of speak to that? Because I know so many people that reach
Yeah.
a pinnacle of success in business, and maybe they've chased it for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's an identity issue. Maybe it's just a lack of understanding, but they get there and it's like, but I really want to do something now significant. I think you can have significance with success in a business world and have a kingdom impact and leave a legacy. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. The biggest piece of that 17-year-old kid that I have really unpacked in my 40s is that I actually felt guilty for not going into ministry.
Mm,
There was an unhealthy reality there. And as I've gotten older and realized some of the things that I was struggling with, as I was actually struggling with that then. And
mm,
when I realized that I could do it, I only realized that because I saw it. I didn't realize that because someone taught me that in a classroom. It's why I think it's super important for teenagers to get a job. Um, this is just a side note. A lot of people, especially where I live, they will say, "Oh, my son's job is school," and I look at that parent and I'm like, I don't know about you, but I've never had a calculus test pay my water bill. I've just never had that happen, right? I've never taken the Spanish test, and all of a sudden my gas bill has been paid. The reality is we've got to actually give hands-on opportunities to learn how to apply these things. So when I saw it, I was able to go, wow, you can do this. I don't have to feel guilty
mm.
for not going and being a youth minister, because my youth minister was the most impactful man in my life during that stage going into that Chick-fil-A job. And I actually felt this loyalty, this burning desire to do what he was doing, which was to pour into the next generation, not knowing that you
Mm,
could do that in the business world. So I
mm.
do think, like you said, the importance is to actually live out your purpose, not to find a function.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've created in my coaching consulting model is I call it the 6 circles of sustainable change. And the idea of that is that we must ask the right questions in the right order, right? So often we ask the wrong questions and we wonder why we're frustrated. So let's just unpack. If you're to think about all the wisdom that we've ever been given, there's really nothing new under the leadership sun, right? We're just
Right.
repackaging it in a way that makes sense for ourselves and hopefully makes sense for others so that they can grow and develop. And you could sum up, I think, all wisdom by taking the book of Proverbs and just going, yep, there it is, that one verse, boom, I'll write a whole book on it. And then you've gotten purpose-driven life. Boom, you've gotten Love Does by Bob Webb. You've got these great books that, and in my opinion, just amplify or simplify the principles. But what I've learned is that we must ask, the first question is, why do we exist? The second question is, who am I? The third question is, where am I going? Where are we going? Third is how to get, fourth is how to get there. Fifth is then what do I do? And then sixth is when, right? What and when.
Mm.
So why do I exist? Why, who, where, how, what, when. When we ask in that order, we can create sustainable growth, sustainable change. The Atomic Habits principles, right? Other books that are out there, they talk about this, and it's the same principle. Simon Sinek starts with why, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we go back, literally, God said, you were created for a purpose. Well, created for a purpose means is why do you exist? Why does something exist is the purpose of that human or thing, right? Why does a phone exist? Why does a cup exist? They serve a purpose. And I slowly started to realize that I started out with the right reasons, right? As a 22-year-old, I was all for purpose, right? And we can unpack this more, but I realized after a while is, wow, I am doing this. And what was originally for a purpose is now back to this guilt, now back to this, I've got to show up, and man, I'm not showing up good enough, and I'm not who I believe God created me to be. And a lot of that doubt crept back in. And I mention that because that's now what I see. I want to help the next generation understand is you do need to start with purpose. Right? If you don't have a clear purpose, nothing else is going to be clear, because you might have a strong function, but you're not going to have a strong purpose.
Yeah, well, that's so good. Created on purpose for purpose. It's kind of the beginning point for a life of fulfillment, for sure, in any kind of direction. That's awesome.
But I kind of didn't answer your question, so make sure I unpack. Once again, I want to make sure I actually answer your first question, Terry.
Well, everything you're saying is good stuff, so you just run with it.
Yeah.
You talked at such a young age, which that is just, it's amazing to me. What do you think was it the youth pastor? Was that the inspiration for your current career? Is that what made you make the jump, or was it that operator that you went to work for?
Yeah. So Ernie Forrester, which Ernie now lives, he passes by my Chick-fil-A to go see his mom, and it's such a blessing. He'll stop by every once in a while, and it's literally like we'll just pick up this conversation like it was 40 years ago, and it's just absolutely incredibly humbling. But yeah, no, what was in theory became very clear when I started working at Chick-fil-A. And so, I'd played on sports teams. I'd played basketball and baseball and golf and stuff growing up. But then I got to Chick-fil-A and I was like, wow, look at this team. Look at what we're accomplishing, right? If Seth and Scott ever listen to this, the three of us, man, we could run that Chick-fil-A kitchen with our eyes closed. And we would talk trash to each other and to the front counter team. It's like, bring it on, right? And it was a challenge. And I tell people, I don't know you, but I want to beat you. And then also I'm like, oh, I'll still pray for you. But for the record, I want to do something where I can compete and I can care, right? In my current restaurant, we talk about, we want to have a culture of competition and care, not or, right? We want to compete, right? But we're not competing to be me. We're competing to be our best. And we care because the individuals, the people are really what make this worth it. And so Ernie, Brad, and David, they showed me what I had heard, right? What I thought. And it became real when I was able to then teach someone else these same principles. And I'm 17 years old, and they're giving me real responsibility. I had real responsibility. I was 18 years old, and I had keys to the restaurant. And I think about that. And I now do the same thing with high school and college students, where I'm going, listen, we are not going to just go, good luck, and push you off the diving board. We're going to send you through our leadership development process. And then we are going to then say, now it's your turn. Right? It's now your opportunity to accept responsibility, to respond with courage, to be able to now show these things that you want to do. And so the short version is, I'm so grateful for Ernie, David, and Brad, who took a chance on a kid. They believed in me, right? And gosh, there's the emotional moment when I look back and I go, my life could have totally gone differently, right? But it didn't, because of what they did, how they poured into and cared for me as a teenager.
That's so powerful. I think if we just sit, we think about that. you just never know the influence you're having in those moments. It's going to change the trajectory
Mm.
of somebody's life, and then ultimately the generations in their family. I think there's something to be learned from what you were saying there, as well as I often look at the military. You know, sometimes we look at people coming into our industries, and it's like, well, we I think sometimes we make these false assumptions based on the age of a person. I've always found that
Mm.
maturity doesn't necessarily come with age. Some people just get older. They don't mature.
Absolutely.
They just get older. And so it caused me to begin to look at younger generations for more responsibility and promotions. It's like, you don't have to look any further than the military. They're not actively
Hmm.
going out and trying to recruit 40-year-olds with 20 years or 30 years of life experience. You know, they're looking for people with no experience. They believe in their training process and know, you know, we can turn these young men and women loose with billions of dollars worth of equipment and trust them to, you know, protect our nation. It's like,
So
there's probably a
what a
lesson to be
great
learned there.
example.
Yeah. Given responsibility, training, and opportunity, they can rise to the occasion. It has little to do with age.
Yeah, and
And
the thought there that going back to what I've realized is that they're all there for the same purpose, though. The
yeah,
purpose
united.
is absolutely crystal clear. So you have a clear purpose, clear values, and then you say, this is the mission, this is the vision, this is the goal that we're
Yeah,
going after. And now we have a strategy, we have a system that we are going to run you through that will then lead you there. It's your choice to do the work. We
yeah,
cannot force you to do the work, but we are going to teach you how to do the work, not what to do, but how. And then you got to put in the effort. And it's really
yeah,
powerful that it then yields that result. We can't have behavior management as our goal. Behavior management doesn't work, but behaviors do come as um, we do the work. The model that we use, we have goofy acronyms. We have TLAs at CFA, FYI, and a TLA is a three-letter acronym. So you got to have a lot of TLAs in whatever organization you're in. But we have this model that it's CFA, current state, future state action plan. And it's very simple. Our current results are coming from our current behaviors. So if we want to get our future results, we need to change them to future behaviors. And
very good.
those behaviors have to be within a system, and that system has to be in line with our vision, and that vision has to be in line with our values and our purpose. And when those things get in line, you start seeing this smoothness. You're driving down the road with your wheels aligned. I remember Andy
Yep.
Stanley said this years ago. And you think about if something's not in alignment, it's like driving down a car. You drive down a road
Hmm.
in a car, and it's like, oh, why is this not working? Well, because the tires aren't aligned, right?
Yeah.
And you can change the tires, but that's not going to fix anything unless there's alignment. So
Yeah.
I, I love now that I can look back and say, wow, Brad and David had a system, right, that was in line with the purpose, values, vision, strategy. And that's why it worked. And that is replicable. That is teachable. That is something that I believe that I'm now a steward of to teach the next generation, just like you were saying, to be
Mm.
culture-neers, right?
Yeah, and that misalignment, I mean, it's a great analogy because just if you go back to the car, if you let that go long enough, not only is the ride bumpier than what it was intended to be, but it will eventually do damage to other parts of the vehicle because
Yep.
it never was designed to go in that direction in that way. And is that not a perfect picture of culture? When it's
Mm-hmm.
off, you know, you can be doing some of the things, you can be headed in most of the right direction, but you're not producing the result. You're not getting the peace. It almost seems like there's not grace on what you're doing. It's like it's a push uphill. Where's the momentum? I can't get the engagement that I think we need to. And usually it's just get under the hood a little bit and begin to tweak, and you'll find it's probably culture and something is misaligned in that. Somebody's got off course on mission or vision or values, forgot why they signed up to do what they're doing every
Yeah,
day, and it just become repetitious, you know, and it really wasn't coming out of the heart and being intentional. So,
it's good.
so I'm curious, the greatest lesson, if you look back, there's so much about your formative years that's intriguing. What was the greatest lesson, if you look back, you think your parents ever taught you?
So as it's interesting, I love my mom and dad. We have a great relationship. My parents were divorced when I was 5, and my mom got remarried to a stepdad. My dad got married to a stepmom, and let's just say that my stepdad was less than excellent. Would that be the right way to say it, Terry?
That would be the political correct way to say that, probably.
That's the
Yes.
politically correct way. Rest his soul. But I tell you, the greatest lesson that I learned was to know Jesus, honestly, when it boils down to it, because my mom led me in a way uh, from her dad and her mom, especially my grandfather. My grandfather was just the most amazing man. He was a paint contractor that worked hard, but man, he would be the first one to sign up for the mission trip and go build a house in Mexico. I mean, in his 80s, he went to New Jersey when Hurricane Sandy, and he went and built homes. I mean, just incredible
Wow.
man from that perspective. So I would say the biggest lesson that I learned was a work ethic. And I learned that
Mm.
working is what you do to show your values. The five love languages, I am words of affirmation through the roof. Tara, if you tell me thank you or you say, Chris, you did a great job, I'll do whatever for you, right? Man, Chris, I really appreciate you cleaning the toilet. I'll go clean another toilet, right? And so I learned that, wow, that feels good to do work. So I would work hard and I'd be appreciative, and that spiral of appreciation would go upward in our family for sure. So I definitely
Mm.
learned hard work. I learned the values that actually are about serving others, not about myself. And I, I learned that from a very young age. So by the time I was, 11 or 12, I was already working with my grandfather during the summers, caulking baseboards, puttying, sanding, doing that sort of a thing. Um, and it really came to fruition when I showed up at Chick-fil-A and someone said, do you want to do this job? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Right. And it was like, wow, you did that really quickly. I'm like, well, let me show you the secret to washing dishes. My grandmother taught me this when I was 5. You got to get this soaking, you got to get this, and here's use the scrubber, da 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 da. I'm like, that's crazy. So
Mm.
very thankful that I learned values and hard work at a super young age.
Yeah, you were their apprentice in life, kind of how it was supposed to be, and your grandpa stepped in that maybe even a fathering role to some degree. It's interesting, I'm a grandfather at this stage in my life with 6 grandkids,
Mm,
and trying to understand the responsibility because it's a different phase from being a dad. I'm a dad of 3 kids, but
right.
it's it's somewhat of a different level of responsibility too. Grandkids, they look at your dad one way, but your dad is in their life all the time, good, bad, and the ugly. And from a grandparent's view, it's like it's the myth, the man, the legend. They see
Yeah.
very little of the bad when they're young. They just see all the good. And man, stewarding that influence and hoping you can pass on something because you've learned so much, maybe even what not to do. You know, it's pretty powerful. Does the entrepreneurial gene does that run in your family, or is that first generation for you? It sounds like maybe your grandpa, was he a paint contractor, or he worked for a paint contractor?
Yeah, he was a paint contractor. He had his own business, and we called him the mayor of Sandy Springs. If you're from Atlanta, you would know where that is. He painted Dominique Wilkins and Skip Carey, and when David Justice and Halle Berry were married, he painted their house. So these are enormous. Just my grandfather was amazing. He could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves, and he would meet these individuals, and they would just recommend him. Right? They would just recommend him to the next person, and he just did an incredible job. He was detailed. He was kind. He was hardworking. My dad is definitely an entrepreneur too. He's the salesman. He is the person that is. He never meets a stranger. He would meet Terry Gwaltney, and he would 20 years from now, he'd go, Terry, how are you doing? And so it definitely was passed down to me in the way of being an entrepreneur. That entrepreneurial spirit is definitely very clear in my blood.
Mm, that's awesome, awesome, and very needed. Let's talk culture for a minute. If I was
Yeah.
to ask you what your definition of culture is, how would you what would be your definition? How would you describe that?
The best definition I've ever heard is that culture is the sum of our behaviors. It's simply put, it's the sum of our behaviors. It's not the sum of our intentions. It's not the sum of our desires. It's the sum of our behaviors. And
Mm.
I think the best example ever, my boys were probably 4 years old. They were twins. They were 4. My daughter would have been 1 at the time. And one of them did something. I can't remember what it was. That's inconsequential, actually. And I said, my brother was standing there. I mean, my brother's my best friend, and we're so much alike. He's 3 years younger. At the time, he didn't have any kids. And one of the boys did something. And I said, boys, that's not what Darleys do. That's not what we do. And my brother just said, sounds like that's not the case. And I went, wow. Yeah, my intentions were Darleys don't do that. My intentions are we don't disrespect. My intentions are, and I wanted to parent you in such a way. But the reality is the culture is that you do that. We do that. And I use that now all the time, thinking about if it's in the restaurant, it's like, hey, we don't have a dirty, never mind, we do have a dirty floor. And why do we have a dirty floor? Well, the behaviors that we are allowing are perfectly getting those results. Perfectly. Because, and anything generally intelligent I say comes from Andy Stanley or Tim Tassopoulos. Tim was the president of Chick-fil-A. He just retired last year. And when Andy Stanley said, I don't know, 15 years ago, it talked about the principle of the path, is intentions do not determine destination. Direction determines destination. And
so true.
if you get on 75 north from Atlanta, right, you're not getting to Florida. But Terry, I really, really want to. I don't care. Your intentions are great, but I packed my sunscreen. I've got my towel. I've got an umbrella. I've got a chair. I'm ready to go. Great. You ain't making it. And so culture, and I have to wrestle with this every day. It's this moment of humility for me to say, our culture is mediocre in this category. Why? Because of our behaviors. So it's the sum of our behaviors, not our intentions. And to change culture then requires a lot of work, which I'll let you take that take that and run with it.
Well, I think a follow-up question would that be is culture is so intricately intertwined with everything we're trying to do to succeed in a for-profit or nonprofit. Why do you think more people don't have a much healthier culture in these areas?
It's simply because they want to change behaviors. They don't want to change their heart. They, the reality is, and I know that's for me, and I say that because I've lived it. I mean, 8 years ago, I was ready to just say, screw Chick-fil-A, screw all of it, just forget it, right? And I was going to quit because I was so exhausted on the inside. And I'm like, I just got to start bailing stuff off the ship. It's got to go. It's got to go. I can't do this anymore. And I was just focusing from the outside in. I was trying to change those behaviors because it's easy to change behaviors. It's what you see. It's not what actually is going on that's causing it. So we can deal with fruit issues or we can deal with root issues. Yeah. And dealing with root issues, that's culture, right? Dealing with fruit issues is fire that coach. You know what? They didn't get us the number of wins. So we're going to fire that coach and get a new coach. We're going to pay him a lot of money. And then that's going to change it. And then it doesn't work. And we go, why didn't this work? Well, you can't behavior management your way into a heart change. It's not possible. And I don't think, by the way, and this is a passion moment for me, I can't stand it when baby boomers and Gen Xers blame millennial and Gen Z for things. If there's anything that they're doing, it's because we taught them. We allowed them. Gen Xers and baby boomers need to take responsibility for allowing it to happen, right? Omission is as bad as commission. And so we have omitted this reality. We've allowed this type of growth to happen. We call it growth, like we're teaching them something. We keep telling kids, go to school, go to college, get a good education, everything will be taken care of. That's totally a lie. That's not true. We told you this and then it didn't work out. I would absolutely say, well, I need to find an easy way out of this. And that's going to create a culture, I'm not willing to do the hard work because it's exhausting. Why? Because I never learned it. I never learned from the beginning. You got to grow from the inside out. All I've seen is put on a happy face, take an AP test. I got a 7th place trophy in soccer. And it's like that's not how the real world works. So yeah, sorry, I got on my passion.
No, it's so good though, because I think the frustration of what you were talking about, getting to the point like, screw it, I'm done, I'm moving on, comes because we have so much activity of staying busy. It almost becomes, a work of the flesh, because there's always going to be weeds to pull. I pull weeds today, there's going to be more weeds
Always.
tomorrow. And so there's always going to be something to do. And it's, to your point, it's not till you get to the root. I'm going to have to make up my mind. Am I going to invest the time today to get to the root, or am I going to spend my next days dealing with the weeds? Well, I don't have time as an owner to deal with this now. You don't have time not to. So I think it's a change in the thinking of, I'm not managing, I'm leading here. I'm not living in the moment.
Absolutely.
I'm leading towards the future. So I'm going to have to pay the price at some point. And I honestly think many times culture, we talk about this a lot because we share so many principles. And when you're still in business and you're sharing those principles with people that are in competing businesses, some people say, well, why do you share so much? Aren't you concerned about
Right.
them using that against you? No, because, one, the culture is the one thing that can't be stolen because of the people and, all the things that are involved with that. But I said the other thing, quite honestly, is it's a lot of hard work. And most people are not going to
It's a
put the
ton.
time and the work in to do that over and over, because it's not just I grow it, and I forget it. I mean, I've got to nurture it. I got to cultivate it. I got to care for it. Still have to
Absolutely.
go back and pull weeds, and it's painful sometimes, but it's worth it, obviously, in the end. So,
Well, on that note, just a point about that growth process is that so John Townsend, who's written a lot of books, and so his book, I was trying to, if I've got it sitting right here. Yeah, I do. I was going to say it's sitting on my desk. It's called Hiding from Love, and it's one of his first books, but it's talking about the principles of boundaries. So
mm,
attachments, boundaries, integration, and adulthood. And the biggest thing that I learned in the last 8 years is that I did not have healthy attachment. I did not know how to set boundaries. I had no idea what it meant to integrate good and bad, to hold things at the same time, and then how to be an adult. The adult principle is that, Terry, you and I are two adults talking. I'm not a child and you're not the parent, and you're not a parent and I'm not a child, or we're not two children. And the understanding of that, I think, is one of the most powerful and most important things that we've got to teach the next generation. That's one of the reasons. So I went back to school for executive coaching to learn how to ask better questions. Because if you
mm,
ask a great question, you can engage that person. You can engage their mind and their heart to go, huh, I haven't thought about that. Right? The simple phrase of, hey, I'm curious. I'm curious, Terry, what's going on for you in that moment when your son yells at you that you're a terrible father? What's going on for you? Well, I don't
mm,
know. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's unpack that a little bit. And so, to that point about the garden, man, I never had fences around my garden. I'd let anybody into
mm.
my garden, and I'd be like, "Come on, everybody, come in!" Right? And next thing you know, all my plants are trampled, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And I'm exhausted and I'm tired. And then there's some people, by the way, that have nothing but concrete walls around theirs, and they don't let anybody in. And
Yeah.
that person, they're just as unhealthy as I was. And the reality is, we need to find that healthy place, that healthy reality of going, hey, it's my garden. I'm going to focus on cultivating the plants, and I'm going to make sure that we keep the weeds out, because I'm going to have, after I got my purpose, values, vision, now I'm going to have a strategy to keep myself healthy. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to capitalize on this moment of, this is what most people are going to go through sometime in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. They're going to hit a wall of, this is not working how I've been doing it. And you can either, like you said, pluck all the apples off the tree, right? Or chop the tree down, right?
Mm. So good. I think one of the hardest things for all of us, that have any kind of responsibility, is just having the realization that everything that I say yes to means I'm automatically saying no to something else. And
Mm,
learning, I think for those of us that are believers, there's a fine line between what's a good thing and what's a God thing, and it's really just zero.
yeah.
That's the only thing. It's that one O is really what
Boom.
separates that, and a lot of times things that look really really good come disguised as being the things that I should be doing, only to find out I wish I could say yes to that, but I can't because I've already made this commitment.
Mm,
And just living with that kind of intentionality gets tough. The busier you get, the more
yeah.
responsibility you have, the tougher I think that becomes. Yeah. Can you talk to us a
It's
little
good.
bit about the importance of connecting purpose to the people in your organization. Because, you know, when I heard you speak, that was one of the things that really stuck out. And I think every business leader or a nonprofit for that matter, you know, has to have a very intentional, strategic plan that's repeated to begin to drive that purpose home, so that person sees it's not just me exchanging my time with a task for money. It's what I'm doing really is bigger than myself, and what I'm doing is a part of something that's bigger than me. And how you have a plan to do that, especially with, you know, I'm assuming the majority of your workforce is people that are going to be in a maybe not their lifetime career. Maybe it's just a
Yeah,
transitional job for them. So it makes it even more tough, you know, to drive that home when, you know, what's going to matter? I'm not going to be here 5 years from now anyway. It's not what I'm going to do. It's almost like our
absolutely.
kids going to school. What do I need this for? I'm never going to use that with what I'm going to do. And you
Yeah.
connecting that to bring the best out of them. Talk to us about that.
Well, there's a huge difference between intentions and intentionality. And so if my intentions are good,
Mm.
but what am I actually being intentional about? And so for us, we make sure that we talk about purpose first in our interview process. When we are interviewing people, we are asking, why do you want to be here and who are you? Now, we don't ask those exact questions, but we
Sure.
ask questions that are in line with values and purpose. We can teach you any function, right? Putting pickles on a bun or pushing buttons. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that we make sure that when you go through orientation, you go through the job function orientation, but then you go through purpose, values, vision, strategy. What's the most important priority, right now, orientation as well. So you get the details, and then you get the big picture to see how is this connected.
Mm.
Because if I took this, by the way, and I went out into the yard and I started digging a hole, right? You would say, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm using this to dig a hole. Isn't that what this is for?" Right? And so we have got to connect the dots between the tools and the resources and the expectations we have in our businesses with purpose. We can't just say it and expect someone to connect the dots. If we do, we're going to assume, and we all know what happens when you assume in the end. So for us, I have a guy that works with us. He's on my leadership team who is a certified coach. He is our development director. We have a development director in a fast food restaurant. This individual sets up plans and works through their personality styles. I'm a certified DISC coach. So we do DISC for every team member. We help them know who they are and their personality. We help unpack their goals with them. We help them write a purpose statement. We help them see, is this smart, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound? And that's his job. That's what he does. And
Wow.
when people think about why do I love working at Chick-fil-A, why? Not what, why? It's never, oh man, the nuggets. Ah, they're delicious. Now, for the record, nuggets are delicious. And if I only could eat one food for the rest of my life, it would be Chick-fil-A nuggets, just for the record. So I have to say that.
Well, I won't ask
Even
you,
if
so
I,
okay.
yeah, if I never worked at Chick-fil-A ever again, I still would say Chick-fil-A nuggets would probably be my favorite. But we are going to help them develop that purpose statement, then develop values, develop goals, and work through that with them. Um, yeah, we make culture the main thing. Right? We know that it's going to require steps. It's going to require systems. We can't just throw it up against the wall and hope that it sticks. And I've been there before. And we used to be able to, and I'll say it this way, there used to be a lot more people that were 11, 12 years old, puttying baseboards and cutting grass and getting jobs before they got a job. That's not the case. And so as my generation is now in charge, I can either go, oh my gosh, I can't believe these people don't have work ethic. Or I can say, I'm super excited to give these people the work ethic they need. I am
Yeah.
pumped to provide an environment where we can teach them how to accept responsibility. And we get to do that. And what a privilege it is to be part of the generation that's not going to blame the next generation. We're going to be the generation that says the next generation is so creative, so innovative, and we're going to learn from them. And we're going to combine that to make the next generation better. So we
I
have a
think
choice.
that perspective, therein lies why you're as successful as you are. You're looking at the same challenge with a different set of eyes, with a different expectation, And then your actions and your intentionality is following based on what you expect to happen on the other end of that. Not to mention that you're believing in someone that maybe never even believed in themselves because they never even had the
So true.
opportunity for somebody to teach them, train them, model for them what it looked like to, take on responsibility and achieve. That's pretty powerful. Retention is so I think today is just as critical as a recruitment in the work
Mm.
environment that's out there in the world today. What cultural elements you think help ensure those high retention rates? You can spend a lot of money and a lot of time getting people there, but if you can't keep them, it's just this revolving door. And so many people, that's their story.
Yeah, you can look at the data and surveys, and the relationship with your direct supervisor generally determines the highest correlation of, do I love this job or do I hate this job? And
Yeah.
so we work really, really hard at that. So Julia to Josh, Josh to Preston, Preston to Mom. We want to ensure that that relationship is strong, that they're building trust. I believe very strongly in the five behaviors model, the five dysfunctions model from Lencioni, is that you've got to develop vulnerability based trust to then have healthy conflict, to get commitment, accountability, and then team results. You can't go anywhere without trust. And so we think about retention is, does this person trust their direct supervisor? And if the answer is no, why are we spending any other time on anything else? Well, the reason why, honestly, is more than likely we want to have the easy route, which is behavior
Mm-hmm.
management versus growing from the inside out. So trust is tough. Trust is my ability to be able to say, hey, my parents are divorced, and I trust that my parents can listen to this podcast and not go, oh my gosh, I was the worst parent ever. No, they know they're not the worst parents ever. They're great, right? That's a reality. And that's vulnerability based trust. I can say this right now, and I am not scared, or there's not like, I call it a nervous gulp, right? That gulp when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm about to say this or say that. We've got to create that environment in our restaurant where every team member can go to their direct supervisor and say, hey, I wanted to let you know how you told me to go outside and take the iPad. I seem like you're upset. Are you upset? Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I was just, we were in a busy time and I wanted you to get out there. Thank you so much for coming and for trusting me so that
That's so
that really
good.
means a lot. I'm so thankful for you. You're so valuable, blah, 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 blah. So it all starts with trust, and it's not a goofy trust. It's a vulnerability based trust that must be there.
It's also a tool that they're going to use in their marriage and parenting and everything else down the road. Everything
Whew.
you described right there is so useful in so many different applications. Tell our audience how companies
It's
can
good.
use culture as their competitive advantage, because I think sometimes one of the reasons why, outside of it's just a lot of hard work, that we don't put more emphasis on culture with our time and our money is we also don't see it as an investment. We see it as an expense.
Mm.
And we all know that an investment has a cost to it, but again, it's perspective. And so, I hope one of the things I try to do through the book is I was trying to, like, if I can help maybe shape the minds of a business leaders to begin to think about, okay, even if my motivation is not right in the beginning, maybe I can help connect the dots to, if you do this, this, and this is how it's going to benefit you.
Mm.
The byproduct of that, though, is it's going to benefit all the people that they're leading. And hopefully it brings about a heart change to where it becomes a whole lot more intentional. But competitive advantage, I'm convinced, is one of those things that comes from a culture, that people, they can copy almost anything else we do, but they can't steal our culture. So
Well,
how can a company,
that
or
was
is that going to be
exactly what
your
I was
answer?
going to say.
Sorry.
No, well, exactly what I was going to say is that uh, when the statement, I heard this years ago, is, hey, you need to work yourself out of a job. Well, if I work myself out of a job, then you can replace me. But the comma is, and if you work yourself out of a job, you are automatically irreplaceable because you consistently are working others into jobs and you're growing individuals. So I
Mm.
think it's a level of insecurity that people have around culture, right? There's this
Oh,
piece
yeah.
of, well, gosh, if I do all of this work, what if it doesn't work? Or what if it works so well that then I don't have any importance and I need to be important? And if I'm not important, then what is important? And then once again, and I hear that voice, because that voice in my mind is, Chris, you don't measure up. That's the biggest lie that I've ever believed.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you're not good enough. You don't measure up. Chris, there's no level that you can reach that's ever going to be good enough. And I'm going, wait a minute. That's a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah.
I'm believing a lie. And I learned this from Dan Siegel, is that if you base your assumptions on lies, your brain
Yeah.
doesn't know any different. Your
Yeah.
brain just knows that that's what you believe. And that belief then shapes what you actually do. So then I'm going to act out of that. And there's that acting out of that insecurity is going to then create a culture of insecurity. It's more than likely going to be autocratic. It's going to be authoritative. It's not going to be collaborative. It's going to be a really insecure, power or authority driven culture. And yeah, you're not going to have people sticking around. You're not going to have a healthy culture. And then you wonder, why is this not working? Well, more than likely, and we haven't mentioned this one acronym of Mark Miller wrote the book about serve and heart. And
Yeah.
HEART stands for hunger for wisdom, expect the best, accept responsibility, respond with courage, and think others first. Is that you don't expect the best. You assume the worst. And as soon as I start assuming the worst, now I've created this culture that it literally just spirals out of control downwardly. And so it really is ugly, isn't it? I mean, it's a really
Oh.
ugly reality that starts on the heart, that is self-consumed, selfish.
There's some point in the future we'll have to get back together and do show number 2. Because what you're saying there is, and I can so totally relate to it, unfortunately, but there's such a big chasm between self-worth and self-confidence, and we confuse the two. And the self-confidence
Yeah.
builds when we're having success and we're getting the admiration of men and the accolades, and then when we don't, it shatters. But self-worth,
Mm.
which is tied to identity and value, goes so much deeper. And so I can have a loss and fail, but no, I'm not a failure, which in turn means I
Yeah.
can get up, because where I'm at is a temporary location. It's not my destination, and it's definitely not my destiny. But it's so rooted so deep within
Amen.
us. I think even at a young age, that we don't even know why we're defaulting to these things. Why is it that some of us as leaders spend good money to hire people that we're still smarter than they are?
Mm.
And we're hiring them to help us and be a
Mm.
specialist. It's because we're insecure. And
Yeah.
so wouldn't it be smarter to spend our money and hire people that are smarter than us in areas that we want to go to and we want to excel in? Well, of course it would. It makes logical sense, but it doesn't make emotional insecure sense. And so,
Yeah.
we would tap where we're at in our growth to be comfortable in our insecurity, versus letting go of that and be willing to grow even internally and maybe even be healed in some cases, to go achieve our bigger dreams. What a trade-off.
Amen.
What a deception, I guess, and it shows up in how we lead people. So anyway, man, there's a whole podcast
Yeah.
and all of that. That's some good stuff. And we're going to run out of time before we run out of content for sure.
Yeah.
Advice to the next generation of leaders on building and nurturing culture. What would that be?
Gosh, what we just said was what I was going to say. The next step is stop and actually look inside. Don't look at
Mm.
the exterior. Stop and actually do an inventory. I heard someone say take a fearless inventory of what is really going on. Why is it that we don't have the culture that we want? Well, when I asked this question 6 years ago. I want to have a culture of training. I want a culture of excellence. Why don't we? Well, I looked at my behaviors on the inside and my beliefs, and what I was doing is I was getting frustrated that people weren't reading my mind. I was getting frustrated that they weren't connecting the dots like I used to do. Like that's what my thought was,
Mm-hmm.
is excellent people are able to, I give them A and they figure out B through Y and they can get to Z. So I was asking people to read my mind. What else was I doing? I was being impatient. I wasn't saying, hey, we need 2-degree changes. I was saying we need to have a 180-degree change. And that doesn't happen. That is
Yeah,
not sustainable. That is
that's so
not
good.
healthy. You can't expect someone to lose 50 pounds in 6 months, right? And say, yeah, that's what the plan is. That's it. Lose 50 pounds, boom, get it done. We need to say, hey, we're going to lose 50 pounds over the next 2 years, and have a sustainable plan to keep that going. Um, because if you don't, I, you or I will end up basing our lives on not failing instead of going after our goals. So for instance, I said this already, I was scared to death of not measuring up. So what I actually was doing was focusing on not measuring up.
Mm.
Right? That's like saying the goal of marriage is it's not to be married, it's to not be divorced. Well, I've been there, and I will tell you it was miserable because I was so scared of being divorced that I was not living out of purpose. I was living out of this anti-fear, and that does not create joy. That just creates this inner, oh my gosh,
Anxiety.
I gotta walk on eggshells. I gotta walk on, I've gotta worry. And so my encouragement, golly, slow down, leader, whoever you are. Maybe this is the moment. Maybe this is your aha that you will say, I am going to go find a quiet place. I'm going to do some work
Mm.
on writing my own purpose statement. I'm going to go spend 8 hours in wherever your place of solitude is. And I am going to do something. I'm going to clear my mind. And then I am just going to start on a blank slate with right purpose and my right values. And then I'm going to think about where do I want to be 10 years from now? And I'm going to dream, and I'm going to be a child. I'm going to be the 6-year-old who puts on the Superman cape and actually thinks he can fly when I put that cape on. I'm going to dream at that level. And then I'll work on all these systems later, but I'm just going to spend some time getting healthy on the inside and letting that permeate to my behavior change eventually. So I would just
Mm.
encourage every person, go spend some time to write that purpose statement. Spend some time to know your values. Spend some time to then dream, thinking about goals and vision. And the rest of that stuff, by the way, you have really, really, really talented people that work with you and for you. They want to then get on board with these powerful purpose, values, and vision. They're going to get pumped, right? They're then going to
Yeah.
want to do the work themselves. And you're then creating a culture that is super, super healthy instead of behavior managed.
Mm. So good. So good. How's Chris want to be remembered when your life's over here on earth?
Generous and funny. I do want to be funny, by the way. So I don't know why they call dad jokes bad. I'm like, dad jokes are great jokes, right? Dad jokes are just
Fits on the
jokes that
dad, doesn't
really,
it?
really intelligent people get. No, but so my core values. So from a perspective of generous, a great steward, a leader, and funny, capable of connecting the dots. Those are my four core values, and that's who I want to be known as. Someone who was able to live that way, and especially being a great steward. When you talked about Truett Cathy, I got to
Yeah.
meet Truett when I was 18. I received the S. Truett Cathy Scholar Award
Oh,
and
wow.
got to have lunch with him, and super, super, super humbling. He literally that's what he was. He was just a good steward of what was entrusted to him. A good name is rather be chosen than great riches. That was his
Mm.
life verse that he chose as a 6-year-old. As a 6-year-old, that was his life
Wow.
verse. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. And he spent the rest of his life just being a great steward. No intention of starting a company. He just wanted to go have a little diner in Hapeville, Georgia, and then invents a chicken sandwich, and then invents the mall food court, and then, boom, yada, yada, yada. So as I think about
86
that,
years
I
later.
do think about Truett. I think about Truett so much as an example of just the best steward of a life. Right? And so I want to be a good steward. I want to be generous.
Mm.
I want to have, I want to be funny. I definitely want to be a leader. And hopefully that will be carried on for generations through kids and chicken slingers around the world.
Chicken slingers. I love it. Last question. What does it mean for Chris to be a culture-neer?
What does it mean to be a culture-neer?
And that word
It would
came
be to
out of
live
really
intentionally.
culture and pioneer. Yeah, so think about that. So,
Yeah, it'd be to live intentionally from my purpose so that I can see those things come to fruition. So my purpose statement is to invest in next generation leaders to help them reach their full God-given potential.
Hmm.
And to be intentional about that is how I know that I'm being a culture-neer. And it's interesting. Pioneers go first, but pioneers get shot, by the way. They're the ones out
Oh yeah.
front. They're the ones that get shot at. And it is hard to be a culture-neer. It is hard to stand up and say, hey guys, today what we're going to do is we're going to write our purpose statement. What are you talking about, Chris? We got the drive-thrus wrapped around the building. We've got Tommy's not showing up for work. We've got a pest control issue. Like blah, 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 blah. We got all this what. We got to be intentional, and it's hard to be on purpose. Yeah. And I think that's the same reality for setting a culture. It's hard. Anything that's worthwhile is hard. That's the choice that we got to make.
I think we'll land that plane right there. That was great advice, aspirational, I think, for all of us that are listening. It's been a true pleasure to have you on the show today. I knew you would be dropping wisdom bombs everywhere, and you did. Future podcasts, as well as I think just future reflections for all of us. We do an event for men only, 18 years and older each year. And one of the things we do is they go on an off-grid kind of camping experience over a 3-day period. Mm. And we challenge them with talks, and these groups are broke down into groups of 10 men around a campfire, and there's a leader for every one of them, and they facilitate the conversations. And so there's a lot of things that happen over the course of that weekend that's just super impactful. But I think the most impactful thing is after the second big talk under the big top tent, they're dismissed for an hour to go out into the wilderness and by the creek by themselves. And of course, there's no technology allowed on this trip. And they just go with a journal, and they just write what they're hearing. And, what could have been done in their backyard, they had to pay to go away to be able to experience that. But that 1 hour many times has such an impact that it changes the course of the rest of their year, and sometimes maybe even the rest of their life. And so I encourage you, if you, as you're listening to this today, if you don't have a mission statement, if you're struggling with what your purpose is, you were created on purpose for purpose. And there's an instruction manual out there that you can read that goes along with your life on why you were created. And you'll never tap in and find the fulfillment and the satisfaction that you're searching for until you figure it out why you were sent here and what your assignment is. And if you do that, you'll leave a mark that can't be erased. Remember, folks, your culture is only going to be as healthy as the leader. And we'll see you next time on the Culture-neer Podcast. Terry Gwaltney from the Culture-neer Podcast. Listen, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast today. Also want to encourage you to help us get the message out to more people. If you could like, share, and review this content on wherever you consume it, if you go into YouTube or LinkedIn or just whatever your social media channels are, and you could even share it, that would be a big help to us here at the Culture-neer Podcast. Also, if you'd like some more information, you can go to www.terrygwaltney.com, where we have updates. We also have more resources. We share articles there. And you also can find our new book there called The Culture-neer. Again, we want to thank you again for taking time just to listen to the podcast or view it on YouTube. It's our goal to spend 20 or 30 minutes each time we're together to help grow your culture to a point where your employees refuse to leave and your customers can't resist. This is Terry. We'll talk to you soon.